you want me to bridge over something for your like Arbitrum Orbit L2 with no immediate return, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to pull that money back. And then at the end of the day, like, are you really building something particularly like life changing, game changing? The podcast made me a bit pessimistic now, but I don't know.
Welcome to the club.
The eternal optimist, Picaccio's pessimistic. I've never heard that
I think you actually tweeted today about not being a pessimist and why it's important to be an optimist. No?
Yeah, I did, but this one just really, really upset me.
Before we get into today's episode, just a quick disclaimer. The views expressed on this podcast by either myself or any guest are their personal views and do not represent the views of any associated organization. Nothing in this episode should be construed or relied upon as financial, technical, tax, legal, or other advice. All right, let's jump into the episode.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. The research team is back to bring you another analyst roundtable. Today is Monday, April 22nd, but this episode will go live on Thursday, April 25th. Today I'm joined by Ryan, Dan, and Yapper Capital from the BWR team to talk about what's happening in the markets. We're going to kind of switch up the format of the show moving forward. No more governance, and we're going to try and emulate the success that Daniel has had over at Lightspeed. So instead, it's just going to be me and the rest of the guys picking topics. So Runes launched following the halving, which led to transaction fees at nearly 2,000 Satoshis per byte. Which is approximately like $240, $250 per transaction. I am very excited about Runes. I really like Runes. I know we have a lot of haters of Runes on this podcast right now, but I think that they are going to do quite well over the next year. I think right now the difference isn't really that obvious because the infrastructure isn't built out yet. But I know a lot of teams are working on AMMs and other DeFi protocols to support Runes. But I know that like following the halving, I think that was like a big sell the news event as people realized that, okay, well, these are currently the same as BRC-20s, except you don't have to click to make stuff transferable anymore, and it's automatically like works as it's intended.
Right. So it's like one step better than BRC-20s, which was probably the worst UX of any crypto experience, and that's saying something. So it's like BRC-20s really sucked. Runes kind of suck, but not kind of. Runes suck. The experience is trash. It's instead of we're on like let's say any smart contract platform, you get a meme coin. There's 1 billion tokens. You can buy and sell tokens freely through an AMM. Listing, buying and selling runes feels much more like inscriptions, where let's say I have 1 million tokens. If I want to sell, 100,000, I have to create like what looks like an NFT of 100,000 tokens. And then if somebody wants to buy like 150,000, they'll have to buy my 100,000 and then find 50,000 and someone else is selling. And so they like basically get broken out into lots. And it's like it's just feels really stupid. I'm going to be honest. Like I know we're trying to put DeFi on Bitcoin, and that's quite challenging. But it's not. This is not it. That said, like I owned RSIC miners. I'm holding on to the rune coin that you got from holding the ordinals. And like these things are going to probably get listed by centralized exchanges, and people are very desperate to do anything with Bitcoin. Bitcoin L2s themselves are like pretty fake overall. You can't really get the bridges that we see over with L2s on Ethereum. Can't really create that style of bridge yet without an opcode change to Bitcoin. So, but nonetheless, there's millions of dollars being poured in by VCs to Bitcoin L2s. So people just like want to build something on Bitcoin. But honestly, it just feels like we're just moving backwards. Like the UX is trash. It's so bad. And so, we've figured out how to do really cool things on smart contract platforms. I would like to see more doubling down of that. And I mean, what that probably means is we have to bring Bitcoin off of Bitcoin chain. And that's also not that easy to do either. But that is probably the more ideal route to go rather than trying to build things on Bitcoin.
I just can't look my girl in the eye, let her know, tell her that like I'm trading Satoshis. Like I can't do that. Everyone in the comments will probably be like, have fun staying poor. And I probably won't have fun staying poor while R6 or Runes, whatever you want to call them, just go up only when they do get listed on centralized exchanges. The cabal has said that these will pump and they shall pump. but I just don't know what we're doing here. That's not why I got into this game, and I just don't see. I mean, little pups are pretty cute. I don't know what those are in BRC-20 ordinal world. Like, I don't know what any of these things are anymore because I don't pay attention to anything going on in the Bitcoin ecosystem. But yeah, I'm kind of interested to see like how do AMMs actually, how are AMMs actually built in the Bitcoin blockchain? Is that actually a real thing, or are you making that up, Akachi?
No, I'm not making it up.
It's also not real.
Yeah, that's also very true. It's not live yet. I know there's a couple of teams working on it. I don't want to mention any of them by name just because I'm not sure if they're going to launch a proper product. Previously, there were a couple, but they somehow relied on Ethereum as well. I don't genuinely, I don't know how it works. So far, all of the Bitcoin DeFi products have been basically like what you would imagine DeFi was like before, like probably the first like DeFi protocols would be like before Aave or like ETHLend, I guess.
Like Ether Delta for Bitcoin?
Yeah, basically like I don't think they work at all. But I don't know about the rune stuff because that's tokens on the chain, like tokens on Bitcoin. I don't know how useful that is, especially if you're like buying and selling and you can only buy and sell like lots of 300, 400, let's say, and buying that costs $200, but you also have to do like transaction fees that are like $150. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. But
what's the bull case for runes? Like what, besides dumping on the heads of retail that don't know any better because you got early, like what's like the unlock here in that? Because I just don't get it.
I mean, why would you buy a token on Ethereum versus on Base? Like Ethereum is just more trustless. I guess it's like more of the sovereign chain. I feel like that's the same thing with Bitcoin. I don't know if what I was gonna say is I don't know if like runes would work on me on Bitcoin just because it's like why would you do that on Bitcoin? But one thing that actually Suzu was talking about this, so I don't know how great it is. But one thing that he was talking about was NFTs / ordinals on these big chains like Ethereum and Bitcoin, because like his argument is basically that NFTs are culture / they're flex, like they're like a store of value, but not really. They're just like a store of like wealth. And he's like, you want to do that on the most expensive chain. So I think that makes sense. But with runes, I still haven't been like fully rune pilled, but I don't know. We'll see. Like if things come online and it becomes a lot easier, who am I to say that like you can't you transact on ETH with you're paying $200-$300 for gas sometimes to just do basic stuff. So like if that's the case, just move everything to Solana or Sui or something.
It's a good question though. Like, I'm glad you asked that. I wish the Unisat is like the leading marketplace for trading these right now, and unfortunately, I can't get their website to load. So I don't know if it's down. That's probably bullish if so. But I want to just show you what this experience looks like because once you see it, I don't know, it feels differently. I think Magic Eden is also launching their runes trading platform today as well. I imagine that they'll be a strong competitor in the space, but it's not live yet, so I can't really show you. But what's the bull case? Well, I mean, meme coins trading has been all of Solana's bull case over the past 6 months, right? Like that is the purest form of gambling, and like that's what is really useful right now, right? We figured out AMMs pretty well, and it's super easy and interactive, and it's just like a pure form of gambling. I don't think that's going to be the end use case of any of this technology, but gambling itself is a massive industry and only growing. And so this was supposed to bring some meme coin equivalent type activity to Bitcoin. But again, like the UX is just so bad that I struggle to see why you would opt into like going through this experience. And the other issue with inscriptions as well. So inscriptions, like Avalanche had like a 3 to 5 week period where the chain like experienced record levels of throughput because people were minting these things. And what I realized when dabbling around with that experience was you mint at gas cost with like no fee. So like you were minting for cents in that world, or as Boccaccio mentioned, you know, people who are minting runes right when post halvening, you're paying like $200 to mint, and then you're immediately listing this at like 100x, and people are buying this. And so, to your point, David, like what are you doing by just turning around and dumping this on like the next person? Like that is exactly what you're doing. And at least with meme coins, you know, you had to go through an AMM, and yes, they're very low liquidity meme coins on Solana right now where the price does 10x in a matter of minutes. But this is like truly, if you were first, you're turning around and selling at 100x higher minutes later. And like whoever buys that 100x, I mean, you got to really wonder. Like think about the R6, right? So the R6 miners have been live. The Ordinal was live for a couple months. You were mining the rune stones. And then like, all right, I just got airdropped a considerable amount of these rune stones. And like, I don't know why anybody would buy these from me. I have no idea what, like, other than price appreciation, which again, your catalyst is just a centralized exchange listing. It makes less sense than meme coins. Like meme coins are a very pure form of gambling where the rules are known and because it's just AMM logic. Whereas this is like just a worse version of that. I don't know how else I would describe it.
But you could just view this as also meme coins. But
yeah, I
just
think it's shittier meme coins though.
Yeah, but I guess this is like before meme coin activity moved on Solana. A lot of people, including me, were always like, "Oh, like why would you meme coins only work on ETH because it's expensive to sell, so you can't just constantly sell." But like now that I agree with you, like Solana is the marketplace like for gambling and meme coins activity. But yeah, runes are just at this point they are just kind of greater fool. As for great, like you're just trying to sell to a greater fool, but I feel like it's for now is my hope.
I mean, last word on this is I think the bull thesis is mostly for Bitcoin miners, right? Like they're going to eat if you can abstract away some of the difficulties with BRC-20s, minting, trading. Miners are going to like absolutely kill. Like I think I saw something this morning. I haven't verified the trustworthiness of the data, but Clean Spark was like I think getting about 27 to 28 Bitcoin per day, I think, in block rewards plus transaction fees. And post halving, you would think that would go down. It actually doubled. I think the past 2 days, they are up. They went from 27 and a half Bitcoin to now they mined 48 Bitcoin, mined plus like in terms of transaction fees, 48 Bitcoin on the 21st, which was yesterday. So like, I'm assuming that's from the catalyst of minting these god awful like things, but I mean that's pretty insane. Like, there's no way the street knows about this, so
Yeah.
that could be some like information arbitrage there. And I will not ever shill BitDeer ever again. I'm so sorry. Don't touch that miner.
Yeah, just to give some numbers around that. So the 20th on 420, there was about $54 million of transaction fee revenue, which I believe was a single day all-time high. And on the 21st, there was about 15 million. So one thing that definitely shows me is there is serious demand for people to do things on Bitcoin. Like that is a no-brainer to me. And at the end of the day, runes are like the newest, latest, and greatest iteration on it. And it is the best, like it's an improvement on BRC-20s, right? So it is the best of what we got. And so there will be these people who want to do things with their Bitcoin. And this is kind of like the thing to do right now. So it is worth paying attention to, but like, yeah, we're not rebuilding the financial infrastructure of the world with runes. But and again, I don't think we need to, right? They just need to be equally as good as meme coins. That's probably really the goal. But I don't think it's quite there yet.
No, definitely not. All right, let's move on. Ryan, I know you have an update on Ionet.
Yeah. So Ionet and Aether announced a partnership over the weekend. Ionet is a distributed GPU orchestration UI and DePIN. Aether is a decentralized cloud bare metal business. Aether is bringing 3,000 H100 GPUs, so leading edge GPUs. This amounts to about 170,000 teraflops of compute power to the Ionet network. With this partnership, they're also announcing that each project will be airdropping $50 million worth of their respective native token to the other community. And this is just like another announcement in a long list of, I think, really important pieces of news that just show that like DePIN compute networks fundamentals are slowly but surely compounding in the right direction. If you look at Ionet, they have, I think, 600,000 chips on their network. They're generating real revenue. About $800,000 has been distributed to nodes. The render network similarly is annualizing about $1 million in revenue as of their latest burns. Also on the render network, really interesting from proposal from the former CEO and founder of Stability AI, Ahmad, around hosting a billion 3D object training set for foundational 3D object models. Ionet and Akash, they have A100s now. We have H100s on Ionet. Like, that's really important onboarding for seed and Series A stage startups that want to use proper GPUs. That, next step is to use those distributed 3090s and 4090s once they get comfortable with these decentralized compute networks. And, biggest news, kind of cherry on top over the last few days, was Llama 3. So Llama 3 is the state-of-the-art model now available to developers, and it's open source. The 400 billion parameter model is still training, but it's going to match ChatGPT and Claude performance. The 7 billion parameter model is actually competitive with the highest parameter Llama 2 models. So, developers in the open source ecosystem are going to be getting more bang for their buck in terms of compute efficiency and model performance. So everything's really, again, compounding for these DePINs. They've amassed useful compute. They're realizing real revenues. They're positioned for the next leg of growth with these high performance chips. And now devs have a state of the art LLM that is just as powerful as closed source alternatives.
Yeah, I think this is pretty impressive, like the Aether Ionet partnership, because what you said, 3,000 H100s, because I know Ionet historically is like to say, we have whatever a trillion GPUs on our marketplace, but most of them are just consumer grade GPUs. No real world AI ML engineers can be leveraging that for any model training, inference, or what have you. But H100s are the real deal. And I think Akash today only has 370 GPUs on their marketplace in total. And I think a majority of them are A100s or some of the RTX 6000s, I believe. So the fact that Ionet, just with this partnership alone, we all have 3,000 top quality commercial grade GPUs, really good for them. And I think that really puts a lot of the other the Akashas of the world kind of in a corner, and they're gonna have to figure out a better distribution mechanism to get more high quality GPUs on their platform. So that's really exciting.
Who's winning this supply battle? Because there's a set number of physical GPUs that exist in the world. If you're one of these decentralized compute platforms, you're competing for a portion of that market. And presumably that's, in my head, that's what you'd be competing for right now, is all right, let's win the supply and then we can kind of win the demand down the line. Who is winning that supply battle today?
It appears to be Ionet. It really appears to be Ionet. I know that Aether has a ton of really high performant chips. I don't know how accessible they are today, but it does appear to be Ionet.
And then I think it was Filecoin is doing something interesting, because their network, their service providers, or basically the nodes that store all the data, have had these crazy requirements, which basically led them to having all of this idle GPU power that they don't really use for Filecoin. But now these machines are kind of sitting there with all this idle power that I think they're opting into one of these networks and kind of pumping their GPU power towards them. Do you know what I'm talking about by chance?
Yeah, so the miners on Filecoin have contributed over 1,000 GPUs to Ionet to utilize that excess compute. And Ionet is a little misunderstood. I know it's a very popular project, but yeah, yes, they are a DePIN, but what they really are is just this orchestration UI that if you have excess compute power, you don't have to build out the Ray and Kubernetes infrastructure yourself. Just plug into Ionet and they'll act as the distribution arm for those compute resources for you. So they made it really easy for Render and Filecoin to onboard like make their GPUs available to the world through that UI.
Didn't they also have an issue recently where somebody was providing I don't know what it's called, like virtual GPUs? Just basically they flooded the market with compute, and then Ionet had to say, we recognize that there are like malicious actors basically trying to farm the token.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And I think like anyone who's paying attention, like they kind of saw the Ionet numbers like really spike up, and like there has to be spoofing there. Like undoubtedly there's going to be some spoofing. And you see like all these networks, like all these DePINs, you've seen it in Helium, seen it with Hive Mapper location spoofing. Um, you know, 99% of it's solved, but not all of it's solved all the time. And they did adjust their numbers. I think that they had over 800,000 chips on the network. It's now down to 600,000. I wouldn't be surprised if it marked down again. At any rate, like if you look at what's going on in the network, they have a cluster of 320 A100 GPUs, and they have like pretty solid utilization rate on that cluster. So like there's real activity going on there. There's real demand there, and there's real flops on that network.
And I don't know it's on Solana, right? Like I should know this, and I truly don't.
Yeah, so things have changed. I'm not completely up to speed, but they're due to congestion problems on Solana. I think that they've onboarded some of their infrastructure to Aptos.
That's really interesting. I was gonna say, like, I'm curious how they've handled the whole Solana congestion issues, but I think that's the case. And actually, like, that's a really good, I think, case study or test case to see, like, is block space commoditized, right? If a large scale or one of the large scale like GPU providers or marketplaces in crypto in Ionet can just get up and leave at least a portion of their infrastructure and just go, all right, we're just going to start deploying on Aptos in a snap of a finger. Because let's be honest, like the Solana congestion issues really only popped up, a month ago? Dan, you might know better than everyone else, but I want to say it was only a month ago that this happened. And they immediately announced like that Aptos partnership, which I knew about. I completely drew a blank on. That's going to be interesting to see like if this continues to be an issue. Like once an application hits a certain threshold that they just either max out the throughput of a given chain themselves, or if they run into other issues, like if Aptos runs into an issue, like are they going to start deploying on Sui? Or do you actually eventually see like the ZKasino approach, which is like the app chain vision where they kind of own the entire stack themselves and they really limit or control the throughput at their leisure? So that's going to be interesting to see like how that, I think, changes over the next year or so.
Yeah, it's a good question, and your timeline there is right. Like the congestion problems have been brewing for a couple of months, but have really hit a boiling over point last couple of weeks. But it's interesting to think about the construction of these things because Akash kind of took the separate route where, they're building out on the Cosmos SDK as an app chain, so they don't have to worry about these congestions problems outside of like what their own app can generate. And there's just like interesting trade-offs there. But I was about to ask the same question, David, and you're right. I think it was honestly last week we did the news update that that Ionet was moving to some of their infra to Aptos, which is funny. But yeah, it's interesting just to kind of see the design trade-offs. And you're right, like if moving your app is that easy, then why not just deploy on like 3 of the 5 fastest, most high throughput capable chains? That saves you the headache of having to run your own infrastructure. Like running your own app chain is not just like, it sounds great, but there's a whole, DevOps perspective to actually running that.
Or launch an AVS and large eigenlayer or something.
Maybe once slashing is on.
Yeah.
Talking about AVSs and rollups, there's a couple of new, I guess, incentivizing schemes over in L2 land on Ethereum. Scroll launched sessions to encourage bridging over of staked ETH, and Stone, which is apparently a staked ETH variety. I just learned about that today. And Ryan Network launched a liquidity generation event. Shout out Macaulay for this one, where they distribute XP to users to incentivize deposits. Raya is an Arbitrum Orbit L2, and it's kind of this Berachain also does this. It's one of these new networks that enshrines DeFi protocols. Kanto also kind of did this, but they didn't enshrine it; they just launched with it. And Raya has a clearing protocol to deal with margins, etc. Because I think they have an inbuilt perp stacks as well. LP pool and stable coin enshrined into the network. So this is like, I think we're seeing a lot of these generalized L2s try and differentiate themselves in one way or another. But I really don't like. This is the only thing that I'm probably not like perpetually optimistic about, is that I don't want this many L2s. Like it's my nightmare to have to bridge over to a million things. And even though it's really exciting, I think like before it was a lot more exciting, because when you participated in these things, you would liquidity mine and you would get immediate rewarding. You'd get like instant. But now with this whole points program, like Raya is doing XP, distributing XP. When am I getting that into tokens? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Why would I give you? We'll talk about this later as well with ZKasino, but like, you want me to bridge over something for your like Arbitrum Orbit L2 with no immediate return, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to pull that money back. And then at the end of the day, like, are you really building something particularly like life-changing, game-changing? The podcast made me a bit pessimistic now, but I don't know.
Welcome to the club.
The eternal optimist, Boccacio's pessimistic. I've never heard that.
I think you actually tweeted today about not being a pessimist and why it's important to be an optimist. No?
Yeah, I did, but this one just really, really upset me. Just because this is literally like protocol could do really well. This is like, it could genuinely do well. The thing is that it's literally a combination of like two things. It's just like an Arbitrum Orbit L2, one-click deploy. Not one-click deploy. There's some DevOps, but it's like regularly kind of easy to deploy. And then it's like basically the Berachain / Canto. Oh, we're gonna like launch with protocol. It's not that new, but they're positioning themselves as new. It just slightly upsets me.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're likely using a RAS deployer like Conduit, and it literally is like 1 or 2 clicks, and you have a full blockchain. It's actually, I mean, from that angle, it's kind of cool. But I agree with you. Like, we're just launching all these chains, and interop sucks, and it's not so much fragmentation of liquidity specifically anymore, right? Because there's like 7 or 8 L2s that have over $1 billion of liquidity. Like that's not the fact that you're fragmenting the liquidity so much. It's that you're fragmenting the applications and the users. So now to get in between chains, like, yeah, sure, the liquidity is fine on 2 destination chains, but you still have to move there if you want to use a different app. And it's hard. Like, app developers have to choose which chain they build their infrastructure on. Like, yes, you can do multiple chains, but like that, it becomes a larger operation than just deploying on one spot where the users are and you can interact with all of them. So yes, the liquidity problem isn't, I would say, a huge deal. Of course, these L2s are still very much battling over that, but you really fragment the users and the developers and the applications. That's really the real problem here. With Raya specifically, it's almost like they're going for that like sector specific chain. I actually think like Say used that in their original branding when they launched their original Cosmos chain of like, hey, we're going to focus on bringing DeFi. We're going to have core primitives ingrained in the chain on day one. I think it was they had the validators of the chain running oracles. So like everything on the same chain on that chain was using the same oracle feeds. So stuff like that. I agree. It's not like super new, but I also don't think anyone's done it right either. So, and Berachain hasn't launched yet, and like they're kind of a new iteration on this, as you mentioned. But yeah, I don't know. Like, is that going to be better than Arbitrum or something that already has liquidity, mindshare, attention? It's hard to say.
No, it's a no. It's not hard to say. It's a no. It's not going to be better. Let's be honest. No one's going to use it.
Yeah, and like on the farming side too, like, okay, the first points program is super effective. Let's say it's 100% effective. But to Boccacio's point too, like there is some diminishing returns you're getting when you're the 73rd points program to launch, especially in the same sector. Like, okay, Blast did absorb a couple $1 billion of liquidity when they launched their points program. But now, like, I don't know, it's being an L2 and launching points. It's not like you're going to get another $2 billion of deposits like Blast did.
Yeah. The one thing with the building that trading focused L2 thing is that I think it's not the right approach to immediately build that. I think DYDX did really well, like where they were on a chain, get a lot of, I mean, obviously it's also like a well-established protocol. It's been some time now, but like another example would be Hyperliquid. Is like, I think they originally launched on Arbitrum and they were only on Arbitrum, and then they launched like an L1. And it's the same with DYDX. Like they were on a chain and then they launched an L1. So I think like while you're gaining users / like establishing yourself, you want that liquidity that the original chain offers. And then once you have some regular users, then you can build out the L1 and like get rid of the noisy neighbor problem. But I think just the trading focused L1 / L2, people want tried and trusted and stuff that they're familiar with. They don't want to just bridge over to a new chain. You're not gonna get any like organic users. You're gonna get some guy who's bought spot ETH, shorted spot ETH or something, some shorted ETH on futures on your chain, and that's how like they're just farming you, not like actually using the exchange.
Strong agree.
All right. Moving on, we're now going to have a quick word from Tapioca, thanks to our fantastic sponsor, Layer Zero.
All right, guys. For this week's Layer Zero segment, we have Matt, founder at Tapioca and OmniChain Money Market. Thank you so much for coming on, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So just to start us off, what is an OmniChain Money Market and what type of user behavior does it enable?
Yeah, so basically what Tapioca enables is for users from many different networks, whether they're EVM or even non-EVM, to basically borrow, lend, leverage up, and open CDPs basically from any chain. And previously, before, you would have like protocols like Aave where they're deployed in isolated deployments to each chain. Like you have an isolated deployment of Aave v3 on Ethereum, then you have the same deployment on Optimism, and the two can't cross communicate. Whereas basically using Layer Zero, Tapioca is able to have like one ETH market across every chain. So regardless if you're on a Layer 2, if you're on ETH L1, you're able to borrow, lend, leverage from that one, market. So you get a lot more capital efficiency, from having just one market and not fracturing and fragmenting all the liquidity everywhere. And secondarily, also just user experience wise, it's a lot nicer to not have to switch chains and then go, oh, Optimism is more liquidity, the rate's cheaper, let me go bridge over there, or let me go bridge back over here. So it just takes a lot of steps out and makes the UX a lot cleaner as well. So essentially, in Layer 0 V1, they had payloads where you could just write a huge piece of data that you wanted to send from chain to chain. And actually that caused us that we needed, giant payloads to execute multiple contracts on different chains, stuff like that. Whereas with Layer 0 V2, that's all natively able to be done. So now the executor in the Layer 0 model can now trigger different design patterns where you can have like ABA calls where you send a message to, let's say, Ethereum to Arbitrum, then Arbitrum back to Ethereum, like a recursive message, or like ABC call where you go to like 3 different networks in one message. So there's actually a lot of like horizontal and vertical composability you can do with OFTs, and this has only ever been able to be done with Layer 0. So it's unlocked a lot for us with especially Layer 0 V2, which just came out in January.
Nice. To hear that Layer 0 has been a sort of ideal solution for you to build this out, and super cool to see like what it's enabled to actually. Something else I wanted to ask is, does Tapioca have any exciting plans on the roadmap for the next 12 months?
Oh yeah, so we've been building with Layer 0 for the last 2 years. Just pretty much day one, we were building on Layer 0 V1, and then Project Essence came out, we built on that. Then Layer 0 V2 came, DVNs came out. We're running our own DVN called PearlNet. But essentially, we've been building the whole time, so we're finally getting close to release and genesis of our protocol, which is awesome. And I think people are going to be really excited the next probably in the next month here, what we're going to be coming out with. We don't have a hard date yet, but we're very close TM. So
just one last question on that front. Layer 0 V2 has a whole bunch of DVNs available. Why did you guys choose to sort of like use your own DVN instead of like opting into like an existing DVN that Layer 0 has?
Yes. Yeah. So first I'll touch on that. So a DVN is a decentralized verifier network. Essentially, in Layer 0 and basically any cross-chain messaging protocol, you normally have some type of relayer or executor to actually execute the message on the destination. And then you have a verification model, which generally will be like a multi-sig, an Oracle, something like that. So, and these two parties kind of work together to actually execute messages. The biggest thing with DVNs that I think a lot of people haven't picked on yet, because I think there's going to be hundreds of DVNs very, very soon, but is being able to be sovereign. I think the multi-chain exploit on Phantom could have been a lot different if each application was sovereign over their own cross-chain communication. So with Layer 0, you already see, I think there's about 30 DVNs right now. So like a protocol like us, will be sovereign over our messaging. Gelato Network has one, Polyhedra has, there's tons and tons of DVNs, which is great. And the coolest thing, just to add, is you can mesh these DVNs in their X event of many model. So you can basically reduce trust in like us with PearlNet and, require, let's say, a 2 or 3 threshold out of PearlNet, Google Cloud, Polyhedra, and Gelato, so that you can, have two of those 3, verify a message essentially. So you're not trusting any single one of them.
Nice. That was super eloquently explained. So I really appreciate. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But thank you so much for coming on, Matt. Now, moving on to our hot seat cruise zone segment.
All right, we're back. One of the biggest things that happened this week was ZKasino. I don't know if you guys all had time to look into that or read about it, but basically ZKasino is a gambling platform, and they took 10.5k ETH, worth approximately 32 million United States dollars, worth from their users who bridged onto the chain, transferred it over to a 3 of 4 multi-sig, and staked it with Lido. Previously, they had advertised that users can liquidity mine the native token ZKas by bridging ETH to the chain, and they, on their website, they explicitly said all the ETH bridged over will be returned and bridged back. Instead, they staked it with Lido and gave users vesting ZKas back. So they put it, I think it's 12 months, it might be 18. And then now all of their basically the people who invested in them, MEXC, and the remaining investors have basically said we don't want to be associated with the team. I think Big Brain Holdings they claimed that Big Brain Holdings, who are pretty big, they invested in Solana and stuff. ZKasino claimed that they had invested, but they came out and said we haven't. So this is today has just been kind of crazy, because if you scroll the timeline, you're just seeing a bunch of passport pictures of the founders, and they're death threats everywhere, and it's just very, very serious. Honestly, it was kind of a depressing as you see people say, hey, I'm gonna come find you, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what you guys think of it.
So did they basically steal the $30 million?
My take is that they're probably just staking it to earn some yield on it, and they will return it back. I think originally they wanted to just steal it, which is kind of crazy that they thought they could get away with $32 million. That's a lot of money. But then I think they had to shut down Telegram channels because they were hiring hitmen in the channels. So it's I think hopefully they're gonna return the money back.
Is this the same ZKasino? Didn't they post the video
Yeah.
of someone getting hit by a car and tried to make a joke out of it or something?
Yeah, they did.
I mean, to me, that's the classic story of where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, I don't know much about the ZKasino team, so I don't want to go saying things, but there were signs that they weren't the greatest people of all time, such as laughing at people getting hit by cars.
Is ZKasino in L2?
They went and made an L2 with I think it was a one-click deploy kind of L2 as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, I mean, the takeaway for me here, I mean, there's not much, it is what it is. But how you see these different ecosystems just having their own personality. There are there's the cypherpunk chains, there are the casino chains, there's the developer oriented chains, and then there's the absolute like scam, like bad part of the neighborhood chains. And this seems to be one of them.
Yeah, that's actually a good classification there, and I would like absolutely never condone, trying to threaten someone's life. That's taking things way too far. But it is interesting that I feel like you should kind of be weary if, at this point in the market cycle, if a team that was building a product that maybe like wasn't getting the PMF and they're like, oh, we need to launch an L2. Like that's the valuation juicer these days, is just like pivot to being an L2. It'll be interesting to see how much longer that lasts, because I think the market's kind of waking up to not everything needs an L2, and it's really easy to launch an L2 now with like things like RAS deployers, where it literally is a couple clicks and you have a chain. And so, like, I think that you need to an eyebrow needs to go up at this point in the market cycle if someone's just like, our product isn't great, we're going to launch an L2.
These guys raised that 250 mil, which is quite a bit of money. Like, I don't know. They just announced it. I don't know when they raised it. But like, I think Rollbit is at like 500 mil right now, which is the leading like gambling platform. It doesn't have its own chain. It's not on L2, but like raising at 250 mil is a lot for something with a RAS deployed.
Well, DGen's not too dissimilar, right? Like DGen launched an L3. That was kind of like the hot thing to do. Is they were the first L3 on base. That's just a RAS deploy as well. Launching a chain's hard though. I think like it sounds really great on paper, but there's a lot of moving parts, right? You need to get a block explorer up. You need to get your data somewhere so that people can actually build insights, like something like a Flipside or a Dune. Like, reliable RPC providers. You need, if you want to decentralize, you're going to need like a node network. Like it's not hard to just launch one, but it's like hard to properly operate one.
Exchange integrations as well. I mean, that's the big thing. These exchanges, they decide basically who lives and who dies if they want to allow people to offboard to your ecosystem. It seems really hard for the RAS guys to. They need that relationship desperately. It doesn't seem like they're getting it.
Great flag, as well as like getting Chainlink or another Oracle provider onto your chain, so like lending markets can work and perps markets can work. Getting native USDC or USDT onto your chain, like it is like there's a lot of BD that goes into successfully launching a chain, which is kind of another reason why I've just been so skeptical of like the world of a million chains thesis. Like it just doesn't add up. Like we need more chains. I think that's apparent. We need faster chains. That's apparent. We need to continue breaking the fastest chain so we get faster chains. But I just don't know if we need a million. That doesn't seem realistic.
Do RAS providers give you a bridging, like a way to bridge in as well? Apart from, I assume they give you a canonical one, but like, do they have partners? For example, if I was using, let's say, Caldera, are they like partnered with another chain, another bridge that could provide it, or no? I feel like
I don't think so, but that would be there you go. Watch out. If you want to hire a BD person as a RAS deployer, Boccaccio seems to be your guy.
Wow. Next. Oh, Wayfinder AI is one thing that I wanted to talk about, because I know that they just dropped their I guess teaser. You can't really see a lot of it, but it basically shows somebody typing in saying, "Can you buy X? Can you buy?" I think they're trying to buy DGen on base with Ondo from Ethereum, and the agent does it. We talked about Wayfinder AI on here actually, I think 2 weeks ago. Every time I come on here, I talk about AI agents, and then back then Sam was like, "I don't see the point of this," and today I assume we'll have another person saying, "I don't see the point of this." But overall, I think it's these things are gonna move so fast. And one thing that we talked about this earlier today with the rest of the research team as well. And one thing that I think a lot of people looked at the video and they were like, "Oh, I can just do this on my own. I can just open the wallet, click. It's not that many clicks anymore as well. If you're trying to buy something on basis, you bridge over and then you buy." But stuff like moving from let's say an obscure Cosmos L1 and moving into like an L3. You don't want to deal with all those clicks. I don't need and you can tell the agent to do that for you. So I think that's going to be a huge UX improvement. Curious to hear what you guys think though.
Yeah, I think my general thoughts. I watched the Wayfinder AI video. As you guys already know, I came in pretty hot in some of our chats. I was like, this is absolutely useless. Like, I don't really see the purpose of this. And I kind of sat back and like I rewatched it. And I think for swaps, for bridging and swaps, I feel like everyone's kind of already copy and pasted like the old Uniswap UI. It's very simple, it's clean, everyone uses it, it's ubiquitous, right? And like for general swaps, it's pretty easy already. And I don't see an LLM type interface that they showed being like a game changer. Like I don't think I'm going to be typing in like swap dgen for whatever Ondo. Like I'm literally just going to be like click, 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 swap, and it works. And to me, it's like much simpler and easier. I think it's an overall better UI. What I did like was like how they actually showed the providing liquidity piece. Like they just had to say like provide this much liquidity to this chain in this pool, and it did it. Like there is no canonical UI for doing that. I've seen many different like ways of doing it, and I think like abstracting that away, abstracting other DeFi activities away or on-chain activities away from users through an LLM interface, like I can see getting more adoption. I think what this really boils down to is like, and this is not just like a Web3 thing that people are trying to figure out, like Web2 as well. Like, what is the new form factor and the new like UI that we as humans are going to like to use in the age of AI? Like, that is what you're seeing a bunch of new devices come out where it's like, I don't know if you guys saw the humane pin or human pin, right? It's like a pin, you tap it in, you like press a button, you tell it what you want it to do. It's like there's a lot of the entire tech sector, I think, is trying to figure out what is this next step of form factor and UI for humans to interact with like tech. And I think this is kind of like boils down to the same like thing that I'm trying to think about. Like, so yeah, I'll pause there, but those are all overall like thoughts. I don't think this is like game changing. Like, can smart agents maybe be an interesting use case for crypto long term? Sure, but it's still murky to me exactly like how and when it's going to be used.
My takeaway from watching this was, I mean, yeah, I definitely hear you, right? Like, I'm not going to use something like that to go make a trade on something where it's like, you know, through Uniswap, right? Like, I'm just going to go use the UI. I can do it faster than asking an LLM to do it for me. But what I noticed was there was no transaction signing. And that's a UX unlock. So think about something like opening a borrow on Aave and then swapping that token for something else to like lever long ETH, let's say. So I deposit collateral, then I borrow the asset, and then I make a swap. That's like, with approvals and whatnot, that's like 7 or 8 transactions. And if you can just say, hey, here's what I want to go do it for me, that is a massive UX upgrade. So like chaining transactions together definitely feels like an upgrade. And then maybe it's easier to onboard this way because you need to know less to be able to execute things. So I think it's broadly a UX improvement, but maybe not for the true on-chain degen, which quite frankly is probably the average user of a lot of these apps is quite technical and quite capable of executing trades. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely like a V1. There's no doubt about it. And like the humane pin's a good example here. I'm blanking on his name, but the big tech reviewer basically did a video on it, just absolutely shitting on it. And the reality is, it's a V1 product, and this is going to be very hard to perfect. Similar to how, like, when the first Tesla launched, it was a piece of shit. The car would just literally fall apart or combust on fire half the time, right? The V2 was less shit, and then today we have like a very functional electric vehicle. And so there is definitely some iteration that'll need to happen here, which I think is kind of Boccaccio's point of like, be an optimist here. The V1 is going to suck. It just is, right? The V1 iPhone was pretty shitty as well. And now we have something that's ingrained into your daily life a decade later. So I think that's kind of my initial view on this, but it does feel like an immediate UX upgrade for some things.
It's going to be interesting to see like what percentage of people are going to be willing to trust an AI agent with their funds. Like, I'll trust it to tell me how to code something. I'll like, give me a code. I want to write a script for XYZ. Like, sure, if it gets it wrong, gets it wrong. I don't lose any money in the process. I maybe lose a little bit of time. But like, if it how does it know? Like, how does it actually know? Was the actual success rate or failure rate of identifying the right token I want to swap to, or getting the right execution path all the time, so it knows the right liquidity pools that offer me the best execution price? Those are the types of things that that is going to take a lot of time for people to get comfortable with using it in size. That we might not ever get there until we have literally the perfect AI agent.
Yeah, I think hallucination's the big thing here. Like, if ChatGPT can make mistakes and you're just losing time, maybe 30 seconds saying that's wrong, can you fix that? But now you might actually lose all your money. But one thing is, if you watch that video, it very clearly asks, it's hey, I'm going to do this. Is this the correct path? Is this the token I'm going to buy? But at the end of the day, that's also not a huge UX improvement, because I have to keep being yes. Instead of clicking the transaction, I'm yes, yes, yes. But for its context, because this is specifically built for the game. For the game, I think it's fine, because for the game, you're gonna put a little bit of money, and then your AI is gonna go invade stuff, etc., etc. For broader stuff, I don't see how this can be used for automated trading, etc. I think it'll be difficult. And the big issue is that we love naming coins the same exact name as other coins. There's a million trillion of the same coin. Even sometimes now, if you go on Dex Screener and you write WIF, WIF, you'll come up with 5 tokens before the actual dog with that. You'll come up with 5 different random tokens. It'll be oh, shark with cat or something like that. That's a separate token actually, but basically it's this one, Bitcoin and Bitcoin. I tell it to buy Bitcoin. It goes and buys Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic Kingdom. What am I supposed to do there? I constantly need to check the contract. So that's the big thing. And that comes to how well can AI learn crypto? Because it's pretty niche and there isn't a lot of good documentation out there. What if it becomes an XRP maxi? What am I supposed to do then? We need to be careful with how we teach these things.
That's a good point too.
I think it's pretty obvious that agents are going to be the vast majority of crypto transactions over a long enough time frame. I mean, if you look at something like Solana, I don't know the precise numbers, but there are a lot of bots hitting Solana because it is so cheap. So if you have a bot-friendly environment, the bots are going to swarm, because it's just better to execute whatever you're trying to execute. I think the problem with agents today is simply the timing. And I'm going to operate under the assumption that Web 2, just an aggregate, nothing against Web 3, but has far more AI dev talent, and agents are bad in Web 2. Even the OpenAI agents that they're putting together, really cool proof of concept. I'm really excited to see what comes next, but they're not there today, and it's taking a long time. First heard of agents maybe 18 months ago or more, when Agent GPT launched, I think it was called. They still haven't gotten it. So I think from a timing perspective, if you're an investor, if you're playing with these tools, it's really still proceed with caution.
And the reason why I'm not bearish on agents themselves, and I'm not necessarily bearish on Wayfinder AI. I actually would love for them to jump on the pod on an episode one day, and for Boccaccio to grill them and ask really insightful questions. I'm hesitant, specifically what Ryan said. I'm hesitant to believe that Web3 developers will be able to bring agents on chain before an OpenAI, a Meta is going to be able to do it. I see this as an opportunity to stick to the narrative, launch a token, and have a quick liquidity event for the developer teams before any real products launch. So I'm pessimist in the reasons why developers are trying to cling on to this narrative today. Not necessarily this use case for smart agents on chain rails. I 100% agree. They will be a dominant, overwhelming majority of on chain transactions in the future. It's crypto rails are obviously the perfect use case for AI to interact in the financial system. That's clear. It's more so it's way too early to shill this type of product to a base that is not going to get any real world adoption. That's not going to get no production ready AI agent is going to come to on chain in the next 5 years, if I did that.
I mean, yeah, look, the reality is we don't really have like once ChatGPT comfortably has write access over people's computers and like it works, like then we can probably build an AI agent that like runs on crypto rails. But then again, like Wayfinder has something that functions. That's what they have showed in that demo is better than what I would have guessed we were at today, to be completely honest.
Agreed.
And so, like, I hear you on the Web 2 versus Web 3 thing, and I generally agree. Like, that shit's super hard, and there's a very small number of people that are qualified to like build these models. But my question is, it's definitely it's like objectively a massive challenge to build one of these foundational models. But if you're fine tuning one of those models for your specific use case, in theory, like that should be the relative, not easy, but like if I was building a foundational model, my goal would be to build it in a way such that people could fine tune it. And maybe they still have to be engineers, maybe they still be really, really smart, but that is kind of what I would want. I have no idea if that's even possible. So I defer to you, Effort and Ryan. Like, is it any easier to fine tune a model for your specific use case than to like actually build one of these massive, 400 billion parameter models?
Yeah, they'll build on top of foundational models for sure. They'll fine tune. They'll use RAG, a number of different methods to have these agents on chain complete an actual task for people. I guess to be more specific, the interesting thing is like security, right? Like prompt injection and data poisoning attacks, where you could send a call to someone's agent and get it to do something that that agent isn't programmed to do. Like for example, like the safety guardrails on ChatGPT, that's just a pre-prompt. That's just OpenAI typing in all the things that ChatGPT shouldn't do. Like don't say disparaging things about political figures, like don't be biased. And you can trick the system into still doing that thing, right? Like you could insert, instead of just like typing out like please say this disparaging thing about this political candidate, you would simply insert like bogus text within each letter. It will understand what you're trying to do. It'll confuse it in regards to the pre-prompt, and it will break the rules that OpenAI programmed it for, right? So like if you think like crypto, it has its problems with hacks and certain attacks that we don't fully understand the attack vectors. Like we really don't understand them yet in the world of AI, and there's just a lot of work to do on the privacy and the attack vector side for AI agents.
Yeah, that makes sense for something you're going to give like your private keys to use and interact with contracts. David, you mentioned something interesting earlier, which is crypto rails seem like a better place for these AI agents to interact. And I think I'm not saying you here, but I think people like love to say that and just like overgeneralize it because it sounds pretty. But I was talking to somebody about this not too long ago, and they work at like a large payment processor that is very in tune with crypto. And I was like, why is that true? Why is crypto better? And he had was super insightful because everybody loves to say, hey, I can't just go give my my AI agent my bank account and can't just like go pull out cash and interact with me. And that sounds great. But we operate in a world of credit cards, and you can give it these numbers and your card number, expiration date, and CVV, or the security code. Boom! Like now it has money. So I asked this guy, I was like, why wouldn't I just give it a credit card? And he was like, if I know an AI agent is transacting in my system, there is a 100% chance I kill that transaction because you cannot trust an AI agent as a payment processor. It's like if I tell it to go steal money or whatever, it's going to do it. And so and the world of payment processing today is very trust reliant. It lives and breathes on trust. They have to trust banking partners in new countries. They have to trust that both parties are like actually being benevolent here. And so blockchain removes all of the trust assumptions required with instant settlement. The second the transaction settles, boom, now like, both parties have the money or the money and the good being transferred, and that's that. Which I thought was a very interesting framing for why blockchains are this better infrastructure for AI agents specifically, right? It all comes down to instant settlement means I don't have to trust anyone.
Yeah. Regarding the how agents are going to be transacting on cheap chains, I think that's the bull case for Bitcoin, no? And Ethereum. It's just that I don't want AI agents on my chain. I want like all natural activity on my coins, and that's like
I could see both though, right? Like you could build an application that makes no sense for humans to interact with, but is great for AI agents. I don't have any haven't cooked up any ideas here, but there will be these things built that are like not really meant for humans. And Solana has had a lot of bot activity. I don't think it's like agents. I think it's more users trying to spam transactions in, like sophisticated users probably capturing some form of arbitrage. But if I did like a user segment analysis to see the failure rate of transactions for people who are sending less than 50 transactions a day, right? That is like very much a person as opposed to a bot, which is sending, 1 million transactions a day. And like somebody responded, were like, well, why are you just calling people users? Like, AI agents or bots, like those are valid users. They're just using the chain in a different way. And it's like a really good point. Like, I don't think the users of in Web 2 or something like Facebook, your user is very much a human being, an individual human. But in the web of tomorrow, like I don't necessarily think your user has to be a human. There will just be two classes of users. One that is like a bot or an AI agent, something of that nature, and one is like the traditional person.
Just depends on what the bot is doing, right? Like bots act on behalf of humans. They add value. They minimize friction. You want those type of bots to participate in your network.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult because we also like this is not related to blockchain technologies, but I don't think I think it's like inherently when you look at a bot transacting on chain, like you're gonna be like, that's not a user, that's a bot. It's just the way that we view other stuff. But this is not related to crypto. Last up is Avalanche. I know Effort Capital is very interested in what's happening over there. Do you want to give a roundup?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things going on in the Avalanche ecosystem right now that I think is pretty much flying under the radar with Solana and like Sui and like all these other move and paralyzed execution environments are, I think, taking a lot of the mind share. But Avalanche has some couple really interesting things going on. So the first thing is, so they announced Vryx back in late January, VRYX, and I guess the technical term is decoupled state machine replication, but in layman's terms, what that means is like in blockchain architecture today, transactions come in from the front ends from RPCs. The blockchain sequences those transactions, like a block actually gets built, and then the block is executed, and then that executed block is then replicated and gossiped across the network to the other different validators or nodes in the set. What Vryx is able to do is actually kind of parallel path these things. So no longer do you have to do it in that sequential order of sequencing, execution, and then replication. You're actually able to kind of do these things in really, like, I guess, in replication, sequencing, execution. You can do it in really different orders, pretty much parallel path these things and really increase the throughput of the overall network on a chain by chain basis. So Avalanche announced this thing called Vryx back in late January. It's really the foundation of this new thing called a hyper SDK, which is allowing chains to really launch like app specific chains or general purpose chains on the Avalanche SDK and offer like 100,000 plus TPS, and really hopefully like launch like the most performant chains you can in the entire crypto space. Just over the weekend, it might have been Friday, but just over the weekend, Patrick O'Grady, who I think is like the head of engineering for Ava Labs, he tested Vryx on 50 geographically distributed nodes, and they were able to test 5 billion micropayments at 100,000 TPS with over 10 million active accounts. And what they showed was that this only, I think, leveraged like 35% of validator CPUs. And they don't think like this is actually the limit of the architecture, even though this was just simple transfers. I think the next test is going to do like more stateful transactions. But I think like the overall thing I think I want like the listeners to take away from this is that Avalanche is making like leaps and bounds improvements on their tech stack. It's going to be very simple to launch app chains, which they already have subnets today, but it's going to be even simpler to launch these subnets soon because there's some interesting Avalanche proposals like ACP13 that's launching soon that pretty much allows subnets to launch with a validator set. And that validator set doesn't necessarily have to be part of the P chain. I won't get into all the details around that right now, but you're going to be able to launch probably in Q3, Q4 your own chain with low overhead and run your chain at over 100,000 TPS, which if that is what production ready subnets can offer, in real world, not necessarily just in a testnet case, then that's an incredibly promising, I think, offering for developers that want to come into the space. And I think that there's a real chance that like Avalanche has its own like narrative later on in the back half of this year. But I know that Dan, you did like a whole deep dive into Avalanche and like this really comprehensive report that's on Blockworks Research's like research portal. Anything you want to add here?
Yeah, that one's free. Maybe we'll put a link in the description so you can check that report out. But yeah, I mean, overall, the vision of Avalanche moving forward is how do we be a place where developers can come and launch a customizable, high throughput chain, right? We use the phrase like app chains a lot, but really what they are just like optimized blockchains where you're optimizing a chain for your specific use case. And so right now, the kind of the gold standard of how to build an app chain is the Cosmos SDK. It's easy, it's flexible. There's something like 80 or so live Cosmos chains connected to IBC and communicating. Map of Zones is a great place to check out what this looks like in production. Large developer community, pretty good tech, relatively easy to spin one of these things up. It's just become very customizable and quite good. With now, once you start getting these developers into your ecosystem and building projects, you start to get some network effects on the tech side, right? Like DYDX has pushed this forward quite a bit, or Say had some interesting things that they did on the consensus side. And so that has kind of been, again, this gold standard of how to launch an app chain, and nobody's really been able to successfully challenge it. But Avalanche is a really, really interesting competitor as we move out into the later half of the year when a lot of this stuff goes live. The Hyper SDK is kind of like their SDK where you can come in and build these customizable chains with your own VM. So you could do something like a very app-specific chain where you don't have to worry about any of the startup of kind of like building a blockchain VM, and you can just come in and tweak just the pieces you need for your specific use case. So again, if you're going to be like a perps an order book perps dex, and you want it to be your own chain, you could like just tweak that part of the consensus mechanism and like kind of get the piece that you needed to launch as an app chain, which is really, really cool. And Vryx is very interesting. It's like they're basically revamping the transaction processing mechanism. And like 100K TPS with just simple transfers is pretty interesting in those test results because there was 50 nodes. And I think we're getting to a point where you're going to probably want to decentralize. Like the rollups are getting a lot of pushback for just being like, why are we doing this in the first place? Just run it in a sequencer or run it in a server like Web 2 style. Like if you have one sequencer, like what are you really accomplishing? I think that's starting to become an increasingly important narrative. And app chains give you a way to get into a decentralized validator set right out of the box. So again, Avalanche is pushing for customization and throughput, and Vryx is kind of the solution to throughput, and the Hyper SDK is again that leaning into customization. So I'm pretty excited about what they're doing. The question is like, how do you get people building over there that prove the value of this thing?
100%. I mean, they have all the pieces, right? They have AWM, so it's effectively like Avalanche's version of IBC. You could argue that it's actually better than IBC. I won't get into technical reasons why. So they have interoperability. They have the SDK that's launching later this year, 100,000 TPS chains, hyper-performant chains, VM agnostic. So it's not, everyone likes to say, at least like the narrative, I think from like ETH.ETHs is that, it's just like a fork of Geth. It's like, no, it's really not actually. This subnets are VM agnostic. Just the C chain is a fork of Geth, but like an optimized version of that. They're doing a lot of interesting things. Like Monad is getting, Monad is like everyone's favorite new chain that hasn't launched yet, but it somehow has a community that's able to get airdrops. Don't even get me started on that. But Monad is like everyone's favorite chain that's coming out because they did a lot of like optimization at the database level of the EVM. It's like, has anyone looked at any of the work that Avalanche has done in the exact same topic? Like I think it's called Firewood.
Firewood, yeah, it's a great point. They originally rewrote the database. I'm blanking on the name now, but Firewood's like the second one that they've rewritten. And state growth and state management is like the pinnacle problem of all of this industry. And NAD is doing some work there as well. But yeah, Avalanche's Firewood. I don't think we have the benchmarks for Firewood yet, but it's again going back in the vein of performance. Like I think where the edge will be for Avalanche is performance. Like they have Snowman Consensus comes out of the box with the subnet, and that is it uses subsampling as one of the most scalable consensus mechanisms. If you look at the app chain landscape in Cosmos, you're using Tendermint, and Tendermint doesn't really scale well past. I think the Cosmos hub is 180 validators, and that's the largest. And they think they could probably get a little more out of it, but you're not hitting that. Definitely not hitting that like 1,000 node spot without trading off on performance. And the primary network today has about 2,000 or so, 1,800 to 2,200, somewhere in that ballpark of active validators, because Snowman scales really well. So you have a better consensus mechanism. You're going to have a better transaction processing mechanism once Vryx is integrated and goes live, right? If you're getting anywhere near 100K TPS, that's industry best. AWM is a great communication protocol. And so now you really start getting the full package right out of the box, and that is going to be interesting. Again, it comes down to the BD. Like, can they get the right teams in there building the right things that kind of spin this flywheel? And one thing I think they can do to push in that vein is put all of this live on the C chain today. Because David, to your point, everyone just sees C chain shitty Geth fork. Okay, cool. Make it not one, and you have the tools to do that.
100%.
They Avalanche had a good push on the real world asset narrative a few months back. I don't know if you guys remember this, but they did like a proof of concept with JP Morgan and Axelar and Layer 0 as well, where they used a subnet to basically do transactions. I think that should be like Monad versus Avalanche. Okay, like Monad just has a great I'm not talking about the tech side at all. They just they have a fantastic BD/growth team. They've done a really good job, and it's like that perfect mix of CT native, but not you're not fighting PvP on their chain, or at least that's the sense I'm getting. You're gonna be okay because it's relatively, the pie is gonna be relatively evenly divided, as opposed to, I would say, Blast and what I think their chain will be which will be these are very CT native, but they're gonna be tough environments. But one issue that Avalanche has just had is that it hasn't been able to cling on to a narrative the way that other chains have. And I think real world assets was really going to be this one. I'm interested to see how that's going to develop. But I think we still have some time for that. I don't think any institutions are on chain yet. And those that did come on, they went to Ethereum. BlackRock launched BUIDL on Ethereum and not on a subnet. So
yeah, I agree. I think the things I'm looking for is obviously in terms of catalysts for AVAX, and I transparently don't own any AVAX right now. But the more I look at it, I'm why don't I? Because if you believe that this space is ultimately going to gravitate to, or the capital is ultimately going to gravitate to the best tech stack, they are starting to check all the boxes. And I'd have to imagine that more serious developers that come in over time are going to want to use Avalanche's SDK, and they have Ava Cloud that they launched not too long ago. Effectively, they're going to be able to do one-click deployments of subnets. So they're starting to kind of mirror some of the standing up your own dedicated blockchain environment, kind of rollups or RAS providers, and you have that all integrated in the Avalanche stack. And there's also value accrual mechanisms for AVAX through the launch of subnet only validation. I just think it's not getting the attention that I think it deserves on crypto Twitter, at least. There's just a lot of other narratives out there, and I understand why. Narratives are hot, but they devs are shipping over an Avalanche community, and I wouldn't not look over there because I think that there's a lot of interesting things that are going on that everyone should be paying attention to.
All right, with that, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you all have a good day.
Thanks.
Cheers.